Montana, South Carolina. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon. And guess what? We're ready to roll. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Dorman Lunch and Learn. Ford 6.7 PowerStroke Gens 1 and 2. I'm your instructor, G. Trulia. We're not going to waste a lot of time with that BS. The handout, again, to remind you, will be up on the dormantraining.com website and on ATTS Training under videos, Dorman Lunch and Learn 2024. Now, let me say this. There are 103 slides here. There's a lot of information. I'm not going to read every slide to you. I'm going to go over some highlights of stuff. We want people to ask some questions. This is a part of our bigger class that we just built, and there's some really good information here. So here's what we're going to do. 6.7 PowerStrokes Gen 1 and 2 out of the 4 generations that they have. We're going to go over some important maintenance notes. I know I had a couple of people either text me or get me on Facebook asking about the CP4 failures, which are very, very common on these vehicles. Essential diagnostic techniques, we'll speak about that. Diagnostic the Ford way, how Ford Motor Company would like you to do it. CP4 failures, that's the Achilles heel of the 6.7. 6.7 issues over the years, and some diagnostic tips. So let's take a look here. 11 to 14 is Gen 1. During its development, Ford engineers basically made this engine the Scorpion because of the exhaust manifold and turbochargers. Okay. In response, GM released the new 6.7, Duramax with the potential power ratings at the 6.7 PowerStroke. They had to revise it, and they increased it from 390 to 400 and went up with the foot-pounds of torque. New calibrations made available to owners with a PCM reflash. Now, by the way, speaking of reflashes real quick, if you do put a reflash in here, a performance flash, and you take it out, you bring it to the dealer, they're going to know about it. So in 212, there's a stamped oil pan. We'll kind of look at that real quick. Going over, taking the plastic oil pan away. The DPF differential pressure sensor added to the exhaust stream. So now DPF, of course, different conditions. Revised oil and cooler feed lines, which is important for those turbochargers to actually live and improve seals. So here is the older pan that you can see right here. These older pans had issues. The newer pan has a drain plug. Way better. The oil cooler updated in 2012. The hidden mounting bolts were removed. This update did away with the labor-intensive oil pan removal. So that is another big plus on this oil cooler. And here's the exhaust system, an extra NOx sensor. So NOx1 and the module were added in 2012 to the after-treatment system. For 2013, the DPF 12 was added to the diesel particulate pressure bank 1 sensor. Okay. So these were some of the changes right here, the 11 and the 12 on that. Okay. The coolant and lube lines going to the turbocharger have been changed from quick connects, and Ford had this crazy idea with these quick connects. I had the problem on one of my Ford vehicles where it popped out and I had a bad issue. So what they did here is there's the oil feed line, coolant line, and these are bolted down. The update is more durable and better for leaks. 2013 crankcase ventilation added. Signals to the PCM whether the crankcase vent hose is connected or disconnected. A lot of times that hose is off, which is a problem. Got a little bit of a case study, can show you that. An additional NOx sensor and NOx sensor module added in the exhaust stream. And you can read the rest of this when you get your handout. And in 14, no significant notable changes to the engine platform. Here's the ventilation system right here. And you can see the crankcase ventilation hose. These things, if they pop off, you're going to have an issue. Any of these quick clip type of things here could be a problem. A Hall effect crank ventilation sensor is mounted on the hose that's connected by a tamper-proof connector at the air lint hose. So first used on a 213 Super Duty, so there wasn't a problem with that hose coming off. Okay, and remember, use the chat for any type of questions or comments. And again, I'm going to move fast through this because everything you see here will be in your handout. Gen 2, 215 to 219. Peak power increased from 400 to 440. Torque 8 to 860. PowerStroke 6.7 added to the F650 and 750 medium duty trucks. Available in 270, 300, and 330 horsepower. Particulate matter sensor and module added to the DPF outlet. Updated fuel pressure temperature sensor that actually measured the fuel pressure. So like a pressure transducer type of setup, way better. Coolant flows through the EGR cooler rerouted, so they manage that higher temperature to keep it a lot lower. Temperature sensor added to the inlet of the EGR. Pickups only. Revised fan clutch that removes additional heat. And larger GT37 variable geometry turbochargers were added. Wastegate eliminated. Turbocharger produces 30 psi at a max load of 130,000 RPMs. In 15, new lower intake revised to accommodate the new VGT, variable geometry turbocharger. New downpipe inlet to accommodate new VGT turbocharge and with large outlet. Turbocharger coolant returned and engine oil lines fitted. Changed from quick disconnect to bolt-on, and manually activated, more active exhaust braking system added, working in conjunction with the new VGT. Okay. The handout, again, I see a question there with the handout, will be up on the Dorman website. Okay. Upgraded high-pressure fuel pump injector pump. New pump looks identical, but features a longer stroke. Revised injector design, more efficient nozzle, to reduce emissions. Revised crankshaft damper design. Added mass due to the increase in torsional forces. Revised low main bearings. Strengthened cylinder heads and high capacity torque converter for the transmission. Shift schedule not significantly altered. Okay, DPF in 15. Sensor removed, previously introduced in 212. And particulate matter sensor and module added for exhaust after treatment. Phew, all that. But you're going to get all of that in the handout. Okay, that stuff I got to go through fast so we can take it easy on some of it. So the PM11 module here, sensor controls the PM11 sensor heater element. The PM11 module communicates with the PCM through the CAN network, reporting the presence of particulars in the exhaust gas that may indicate a concern with the diesel particulate setup, so DPF. Fuel, there's our fuel temperature pressure sensor here. So the fuel and temp sensor is combined. That monitors both pressure and temperature of the low pressure. So this is the low pressure line that you can see what's coming up from the pump. Okay. Temperature sensor, the sensor is a thermistor sensor. That means high voltage, high resistance when it's cold, low when it's hot. And it says it decreases there. Voltage signal is sent to the PCM, is converted into temperature readings. The second part of the sensor is the fuel pressure sensor that sends a signal if the fuel pressure is low. As fuel pressure increases, the sensor pressure voltage decreases. On older versions, the sensor was just a switch that basically told you it was on or off. So this is an improved type of setup here doing that. Now, EGR cooler. The coolant flow through the EGR has changed. The EGR cooler is a carryover from previous years, but the secondary coolant system no longer cools the EGR. The newer engines use a high temperature coolant system. As pictured, the ECT2 sensor had to be removed. That's just what this plug is right here. They plugged it, and later on they deleted that whole hole there for everything. Due to the EGR cooler flow, the ECT2 is now mounted in a fitting in the coolant line. It's located in the right front engine compartment under the air filter box. So look for these T's, and a lot of times this composite type of setup tend to leak, break, and crack. So be very, very careful. You know, when things are new, well, yeah, everything works as designed, right? But get some miles on them and you will have some problems, right? So be careful when you're under the hood, moving things around. That's when things could crack and break, okay? So the EGR-T inlet temperature sensor monitors the exhaust temperature leaving the exhaust manifold prior to entering the turbocharger housing and EGR cooler. It allows for improved drivability in loaded conditions and provides engine hardware protection. So first they just put this on the pickup truck. Later on it gets moved around as well. Lower intake, the lower intake has been updated along with the turbo. There is only a single air intake feeding the turbo. So here's the improvements on the intake system here. Exhaust downstream tube off the turbo. Well, you can see this is like a Cobra head, and that's what they call it. The Cobra head has been shortened and redesigned to fit the new turbo. So on the older versions, these are a lot bigger. They come out a bit more. This has been redesigned. And 16, 17, no big changes, okay? Let's get into the stuff now, the heart of it. We get rid of all that basic stuff. Let's get into maintenance notes. What really kills these diesels, these 6.7s are a good motor, but where they have problems is what I'm going to tell you right now. So diesel injectors produce heat during operation and must be kept cool or else they'll destroy themselves. Diesel engines circulate fuel from the fuel tank across the injectors to dissipate some of the heat and keep the injectors cool. The hot return fuel is then cycled back to the tank. When the hot fuel is returned to the tank, the increased temperature causes a great amount of water from the air inside the tank to condense into fuel. This causes a steady buildup of water on the bottom of the fuel tank over time. Now, this is nothing new. Condensation is always going to occur. But with a diesel, water is not the thing to have in it. It's going to cause major, major issues. So make sure that there's no water in that fuel. So water also is produced from diesel fuel storage due to venting storage tanks, humidity, and whenever there's a 7-degree temperature decrease, condensation can occur. So, you know, we've had swings here in New York where 1 minute we're 60 degrees, next minute we're down to 30, okay? That's way more than 7 degrees. You're gonna have a lot of condensation in that tank. And we need to make sure there's no water, okay? So water has the potential of causing multiple problems. Freezing in cold weather, well, we don't get that cold here, but I'm sure maybe where you're at, it gets cold, like up there in Canada. I've seen Montana, Wyoming, providing a growth of medium for bacteria, accelerating agent of the fuel to produce gums and a whole bunch of other problems that will gum up the injector tips, okay? If the fuel leaves the tank, it enters a water fuel separator and then a fuel filter. When diagnosing diesels for drivability, very important, it's very important to make sure fuel separator, the strainer, is free of water. Because water is heavier than diesel fuel, it'll be found on the bottom of the separator or strainer. So take a look at that. When you have water in there, you're going to have an issue, okay? So Ford recommends opening the water drain and inspecting for water at least once a month. That is something that you should definitely be doing. Use only OE filters. Now, they're real big on this for warranty purposes. When you service the vehicle, as you can see we have pictured here, these are Ford Motorcraft filters, are designed to filter water out as well as debris. Now, you may like brand X, Y, or Z, but for warranty purposes, they don't like it, and it does seem better So primary filters offer 10 micron filtration. Secondary filters provide 4 micron. Very, very important to make sure that these filters are changed on a regular basis. And be careful where you're getting fuel from. That's another issue. Okay. Here's a good little service tip here from Ford Motor Company. Take a listen.
Welcome to Ford PowerForce Tech Talk. In this series, we'll focus on tips to help you fix your Ford vehicle right the first time. Let's take a look at how the 6.7-liter diesel fuel filters work. Using the low-pressure fuel pump located inside the diesel fuel condition module, or DFCM, fuel is drawn through the primary fuel filter. This filter is designed to remove debris and contaminants as small as 10 microns. The filter also acts as a means to separate and remove any water that might be within the fuel. Water in your fuel can wreak havoc on your vehicle's fuel system, causing rust, allowing fuel to freeze or gel, and even cause hydrolock, all of which can severely damage your engine. Before reaching the injectors, the fuel also travels through a secondary fuel filter mounted on top of the engine. This filter can capture contaminants as small as 4 microns, or approximately 1/20th the diameter of a human hair, and will filter out any extra debris or water that made it past the primary fuel filter. Motorcraft fuel filters are designed to work within a specific calibrated range and are tuned to each engine's capabilities. A filter that underperforms will allow too many particles to pass through and can lead to high-pressure fuel pump failure, clogged fuel injectors, or even a failed engine. A filter that overperforms by capturing too many particles can lead to the filter becoming clogged prematurely, especially under cold conditions if fuel has become waxy. This can restrict the flow required for cooling and lubrication of the fuel injection equipment and may cause premature failure. Motorcraft 6.7-liter diesel fuel filters were developed alongside the 6.7-liter engine and have undergone severe component, system, and vehicle testing to help make sure that your truck can perform and survive in extreme customer usage conditions. That's why a Motorcraft filter is the optimal choice when it comes time to replace that filter. And when you're choosing parts for all of your repairs, remember that Motorcraft parts feature a 2-year unlimited mileage warranty.
So now that is something, a bit of a commercial, but very, very important. These filters are designed for this motor. And if you don't use them, you are going to have a problem. You have underperforming or overperforming. Make sure you understand that part is why we put that little video in there, courtesy of Ford Motor Company and Motorcraft. Okay. Now I want you to take a look at this. What do you see here? Well, you see diesel, you see gasoline, but what is missing here? The centane rating. So what do you have nearby you? I'm asking you a question. So you guys get diesel fuel or maybe pulled into a station, maybe driving a gas vehicle, but I know where I go, I can see what's on the pump, okay? Here, this is not even indicated on the pump what the centane rating is. What do you guys see there? You can type it into the chat box. Well, here you don't have enough, and Ford Motor Company says, you know, that a centane rating should be at least, okay, most number 2 rating is 40, while Summers is 55. 45 is the number. You can see it, I have it here in the big box. 45 is the number. A 10 cetane difference will result in noticeable change in engine performance due to the difference in fuel ignitability. So if you don't have that right cetane rating, you're going to have a problem. So what you should be telling your customers is look for 45 or better, okay? So it's usually from 40 to 55. 45, what do you have near you? Does anyone have that there? Let's see. Is there a TSB on the filters? There are some TSBs, definitely look. Don't forget when you change the filter, remember there's one primary in the rear and one up front. Change them as a pair. Very, very important. Also, when you take that primary one out in the back, when you open it up, look in and clean the bowl out, not just replace the filter. Make sure you're getting clean fuel there. Okay. So we see a lot of people just with 40 out there. Thank you.
And 50 upstate.
Oh, 50. Wow. Where's the 50? Someone 40 in Jersey. Okay. 50
South Carolina.
South Carolina. Very good. Okay. Ford does not approve the use of any aftermarket fuel additives. None. Now, I know a lot of people, if you have it, there's heat. There's a lot of stuff to put in the tank. There's anti-gelling stuff like heat. Use only Motorcraft additives. Here's what they recommend. These 3 additives, okay? Nothing else. So what you see here is what you should be recommending for your customer. Service tip before doing any diesel diagnostics: if you don't know when the fuel filter was last replaced, sell the customer a fuel filter, a primary and a secondary. They fail all the time on diesels. A clogged filter can mimic a fuel pump failure, a fuel line restriction, and other common diesel failures like injector problems. So use only OE filters. Be careful with equivalents. We have to put that there. You know, there's plenty of good filter companies out there, but they are really strict on this. We have a Ford dealer right near us here. My buddy runs the place, and he said they've tried sometimes to tell customers not to do that, and people put these aftermarket filters in, some top name brands, and then their vehicle comes back. They get it towed in there, they get it worked on, and then they put a Motorcraft filter in, and that vehicle runs just fine. So be careful. Coolant levels, you know they should be checked. You want the proper coolant in there. There should be, easy peasy type of stuff. Always look at the manufacturer's recommendation. Don't just put anything in and think 50-50. Look at it. Many times it's better to buy the premix and make sure meeting all the specs. Diesel systems intake. Well, an extremely clogged air filter can cause air intake passages, reduced engine performance. We know that. Look at this filter. You know where I got this picture of this filter? From my buddy Pete Meyer, who got stuck out west as he was pulling his trailer. You'd think my buddy Pete would have looked at this thing, right? Well, you'll learn later on, okay? When you have that, the little minder right here, you see the minder? You really have to look at that and then take a look in there. Is there debris coming in, from rodents bringing stuff in, right? Is there just a lot of debris being captured by that filter? The rule of thumb for replacing diesel air filters is to install a new one when the air monitor registers 25 inches of water or less. On older Ford models with the filter minder, okay, that's what you look for. 6.7 uses a MAF sensor to monitor airflow restrictions. So what's the little rule? You want to make sure you have enough grams of air on that diesel coming through without any turbo coming into effect. At a idle with the turbo not kicking in, you better have at least 6.7 grams of air or better, okay? Very important. Let's see, I think we got a question or something.
No, Pete says don't bust his chops.
My buddy Pete's on. I can't bust his chops, but that's his filter. So we'll break his noodles there. Okay. So, sorry about that, Pete. The integrity of the air intake plumbing is critical to preventing dust from and dirt from entering the engine. This is a major problem with military vehicles when we had them in Iraq and Afghanistan. Dirt and debris that make it past the filter can lead to extreme damage to the turbocharger, and we don't want anything killing your pinwheel, right? To make things worse, metal from the failed turbocharger find its way into the engine, and that will result in major problems. So inspect the air filter for conditions. These are things you should do. Make sure the air box is sealing right. Do you have a good gasket? Are the clips good? In addition, the tubes between the air filter and the turbo, make sure they're all fitted correctly, meaning they're tight, they're secure and down, because when they pop off, I think that also happened to you, right, Pete? Didn't you lose a hose? This includes the hot side charge pipe from the turbo and the intercooler. Holds or leaks anywhere on the side of the system can lead to contaminants entering the engine, okay? So the system can be tested with a high pressure smoke machine. So not your regular one for evap, but a high pressure smoke machine, or with CO2. CO2 here from Bullseye. Either one of these are a good way to test it. Service tips here, use of OE filters strongly recommended. On the 6.7, replace with OE filters. Aftermarket filters installed, and the airbox could set a DTC and require a MAF reset. So, you know, you got to have sometimes the factory tooling. Sometimes aftermarket scan tools may not be able to do that. You need to check your scan tool to see if you have the ability to do that. The MAF sensor is used to detect airflow restrictions, and change in the filter will most certainly impact the stock airflow. So replacing it with a high performance type of thing or some cheap filter is going to lead to a problem. Turbochargers use variable vanes that are dynamically designed, adjust the turbo speed via exhaust gases. During low speed and engine loads, turbo vanes are closed to accelerate exhaust gases through it. The turbo outputs 30% of boost at high idle, okay? Now again, I sort of told you I can't read all the stuff here. I'm putting 5 pounds of dew in a half a pound bag, not even a 1 pound bag. But you will get this information in the handout, so let's continue on. Turbocharger updates included dual boost turbocharge has been replaced by the single for the signal. Note, vanes can stick, and the 6.7 has issues with the actuator mechanism binded. Both can cause underboost or overboost DTCs. Best practice, allow the engine to idle for a few minutes as a cool down period before shutting it down. Yes, and always use the right oil, okay, and coolant, and make sure everything is up to manufacturer specs. And that cool down period could help rather than you just shutting the vehicle off, okay? When replacing a turbocharge, install a new filter, inspect and correct air leaks, and keep things, make sure everything's intact. Replace the oil feed line and return lines. Very common. When you do a turbo on anything, those lines could clog up. You should get new lines, new gaskets, new hold down bolts. Inspect everything. Make sure the new turbo is free. Can you spin the wheel without a problem? Do you hear anything? Do you feel anything? Very, very important. Tighten all fasteners to the OE specification. DEF, so for the catalyst reduction for SRC, DEF fluid is made of non-toxic solution, 67.5 purified water, 32.5 urea. It needs the exact concentration. Don't think you're going to add more water or add anything else to that if this stuff is not kept up. You know, on a lot of vehicles, this gets tested and drained. When a lot of car models that are diesel, when they go in, like on Mercedes and BMW, they pump them out. DEF does have a shelf life, okay? And if it's in there too long, you're going to run into problems. So it's a good idea to tell your customer, hey, if you're bringing it into maintenance, we're going to change this. We're going to put new good DEF in there. Be careful of the quality of the fluid. DEF contaminants can result in the various DTCs and cause the ECM to derate the engine output. That means cut your power down, and all you had to do was some simple maintenance and put the right stuff in there. So test it as part of your diagnostic routine. Crystallization, overdosing, all of these things here, topping off the DPF with hard water can cause problems as well. The EGT sensor will affect the DEF operation, so those sensors could be a problem. In order to properly diagnose and repair Ford DEF systems, a factory scan tool or equivalent, and the Ford service information is required. There are many safeguards and reset procedures that must be completed when repairs are made in order for the system to function normally. Okay. So DEF issues, a leak in the redundant system can be located by inspected for buildup. Here we have crystallization on the outside. You can see some stuff leaking. Dirt and contamination can cause problems. Diluted DEF, too much water reduces NOx neutralization. DEF may gel or freeze in colder climates. And contamination of the DEF tank with other fluids, such as diesel, which sometimes is a problem. New drivers or people that don't know, that are not diesel owners, may do this. They may put stuff in there, including diesel fuel and or gasoline. So a whole bunch of stuff more here on diesel DEF reduction. You know, the tank has an ultrasonic level indicator. The gauge will not change immediately. The gauge does not move from F until actual levels drop to 90%. So best to only refill only when the fluid warning light is on. Do not overfill. Overfilling or topping off may result in inaccurate gauge readings. Overfilling leaves no room for fluid expansion. Should the DEF freeze, blockage in the fill pipe may occur if overfilled and the DEF freezes. To correct or check gauge accuracy, perform an SCR activation with the scan tool. Due to emissions, DEF usage is higher on Gen 4 than the previous model. So here on 1 and 2, you don't see as much usage. DEF gauge may not recognize a refill until the DEF fluid is thawed. So with frozen stuff, do not apply direct heat. Not a good idea. Store the vehicle inside to thaw the tank if it's frozen. And when frozen, levels is calculated based on the injection duty cycle and last node liquid level. Common issues related to frozen DEF: inaccurate gauge readings, inaccurate DT, distance to empty readings, unable to fill the DEF tank, floating ice causing inaccurate gauge readings, and possible DTCs. So these are important. Okay. Here the DEF, another thing, the reducting quality module sends an output to the GDM on the scent line. The ultrasonic transducer is used to gauge the DEF concentration by measuring the amount of time it takes for a sound wave to be sent and returned to the transducer. If speed of the return is not expected, DEF is considered contaminated or diluted. So if it's not as expected, it's going to say it has a problem. Both conditions require service and may set DTCs. So this is a whole setup here that is pretty amazing when you look at it. Okay, ultrasound. Who would think they do that to figure stuff out? DEF filters here. Exhaust gases flow through the DPF prior to flowing into the muffler and out the tailpipe. The job of the DPF, the diesel particulate filter, drastically decreases the amount of diesel particulate soot and unburned hydrocarbons released from the combustion of the diesel fuel. And there's more information. A particulate matter reduced by approximately 90%. Okay. Essential techniques. Now, here's something that is important when you go to diagnose stuff. So in the sake of time here, I went through that stuff pretty fast. Again, want to remind you that this is a way longer class. We want to give you a piece of this and go over these important parts. So, what's important? Well, you need good batteries on there, right? And when you replace batteries, replace them as a pair with the proper rated battery, okay? So here we have a pico scope, and what we have here is battery voltage measured at the DLC using a bob. That's a breakout box. This is battery voltage right at the battery with another set of leads, and here with an amp clamp is starter current. So what do you see? Okay, we see that drop in voltage and then it humps up, right? See that? We also see that here on the battery itself. The bob is pretty much mimicking that, right? So both of those readings are good. And when voltage goes down, you notice how current went up. And what else could we do with this information right here? the slide tells you that, you're doing a relative compression test. And if you're smart, you're not only doing a relative compression test, you're doing a battery and starter draw test at the same time. Of course, our peak amperage here that goes up, and I can't read what the reading is there. We have a thing right over it. But whatever that current is, we can see if it's in spec. And we should see where the battery falls. You know, here, like that looks like, blind man can't see. I have to get up close. But it looks like 9.52, which would be good. Remember, on a scope, the speed is a lot quicker than using your AVR or a meter. So this is a good way to see if the engine has a mechanical problem, and a very good way to see if the battery and starter is doing well. In fact, if you let it go out a little more, you could even see when it shoots up where the battery voltage is at for the charging system. So limits to relative compression, everything has a limit, but it's a great place to start. If all cylinders are low on compression, like compression loss of the engine where timing between the crank and cams are off, the pattern will look similar. Look for overall current changes to be lower though, okay? If there's an intermittent loss of sealing, common today, right? So you could have carbon buildup, we could have a problem in a piston, or maybe an injector not working good, causing washdown or whatever. This may or may not pick up the loss. It will only detect loss if it occurs during the test. So let's look at this. You know, verify, concern, check for DTCs, check for TSBs is a real good way to do any diagnostics, right? And here, customer stated, this is a particular vehicle here, an F Series Super Duty 6.7 diesel, okay? And it is a year 16. Customer states check engine light is on, but the vehicle has no drivability issues. Also a message on the dashboard to fill the DEF fluid, okay? Codes were pulled. P0170 fuel trim bank 1 and P21B0 redundant level sensor circuit high. So let's take a look at that circuit high, okay? There's the fuel trim one, okay? But if we went on circuit high, what does circuit high mean for you guys? So when you see a code, circuit high, what does that mean?
Open.
Oh, very good. So Dirk, in open, I think his name was Dirk, right? Yep.
Yes.
In open, very, very good. Write that down if you don't know that, because that's important. Circuit low, usually a short, 9 out of 10 times. Circuit open is, circuit high is going to be an open, right? So open is high and shorted is low. TSBs, so remember, most important tools what God gave us, your brain, your eyes, your ears, your nose, your hands. TSB number 19-2131 addresses concerned with a reflash. Do you have the ability to reflash? Now, if you're working on these 6.7s, I highly recommend that you get the Ford IDS or FRDS, which is on all the newer ones. But IDS can still go on his Gen 1s and 2s without a problem. FRDS would be later on. You'll need to be asked the question about the crankcase vent connector. If you answer this question wrong, you'll have a code of P04E3. To correct the mistake, you must go back and reprogram it as a new module with no VIN. Whoa, wouldn't that be a badass mistake? Okay, that's why this example is in here. So you have the question about the vent hose being connected or not. If you're not sure and hit the wrong button, you're going to have to reprogram. Okay, so we need to look at service information, RTFB, read the frickin' information. Very, very important. RTFI, right? Book if you were in the old days. Okay. So now here, the redundant chart here, possible to short the voltage at a specific time. If the signal return was short at the voltage, it would set a code for the other two circuits. So you could have, when not only an open, right? Here, they're telling you you may have a short to voltage. That is also possible, right? So power and grounds were checked at pins 5 and 8. Continuity was checked at pins 5 and 8. And if you look here at the scan tools, see where the ohms are. An open circuit is redundant level sensor set to code. So the reductant level sensor set the code. That was the problem. Now here's how, got to catch my breath here. Here's how they want you to do stuff the Ford way. First of all, go to nastf.org, National Automotive Task Force. Sign on for free. If you want to do programming and you're going to put new modules in, highly recommend that you become a member, okay? And there's information there. But at least you can get on. You could also go to One Stop OEM, but here on NASTF, you get a lot of information, what's going on. You would pick Ford Motor Company, go into that motor, and once you're in their diagnostic stuff here, there's a lot of information. Here, if you want to use the Ford system, it's going to tell you operating system, Windows 10 Professional, all the stuff here, Internet Explorer 11 or more. This is if you want to go and program their vehicle. They're giving you the spec for your computer. Now, we have the IDS here, and when we had an issue with an update on the IDS, Ford told us, oh, no, don't use Windows 10 Professional, you need Windows 11 Professional. We're lucky we have Windows 10 computers yet, Professional, and 11. For some stupid reason, it didn't work on 10, and I said to the tech, you guys have this listed here as Windows 10 Professional. Why do I have to go to 11? He said, well, sometimes there's quirks with certain machines. So be careful what type of computer you select to put it on. Most of the time, it's a fairly easy system, okay? Now, Diesel Diagnostic, symptoms, system, component, and cause. So SSCC, verify the 6 steps. Verify the concern. Gather data. What do you mean by gather data? All your scan tool stuff. Take pictures with your camera, your phone, if you don't have it. Perform different tests. Identify the root cause of a problem. Repair the component. Verify the repair. Always make sure you verify to compare. So gathering data, look at warranty action notices, TSBs and everything else. May not be available in aftermarket service information. Sometimes we do have to go to Ford. Root cause is a result of the failure, what broke it, and be aware of adaptive resets. Returns to factory default when you do a reset, and that may make that vehicle owner feel like there's something wrong with the vehicle. Meanwhile, it was a reset procedure that just brought stuff back and has to do a relearn. So advise the customer, always verify base engine operation integrity before replacing system components. And that all starts with the battery, right? Make sure the batteries are good on the vehicle before you do anything. And when you're programming, you always use a maintainer. 3 elements needed for proper diesel operation. You need compression, proper amount of quality fuel, and proper timing of crank, cam, and fuel injection. And obviously, it needs air. The diesel is an air animal, right? Use scan tools to check relative compression. If you have the IDS, you can easily do that. Combine results with power balance tests to identify basic engine concerns. Low compression in all cylinders can indicate cam crank timing issue. Once base engine concerns are corrected, verify there's no related component damage, contaminated sensors, contaminated MAF, coking on the throttle body, and damage to the exhaust. DTCs are clues to what the cause of the customer concern is, so that check engine light could help put us into a ballpark of, hey, here's what we need to look at. 2 types of component, DTC or DTC condition. Component DTC indicates a failure in the circuit or component, and that's a big one. In the circuit, not only the component, okay? Condition DTCs can relate to a system fault. PCM does not have enough information to isolate the component cause. Review and understand the condition and criteria needed to set the DTC. So where do you find that? In service information, right? So what conditions can cause that DTC to set? You need to go there and check it out. Testing fuel for contamination. Most common cause of fuel contamination, auxiliary vehicle mounted tanks, local storage tanks, other infrequent use of fuel sources. So that means a place that doesn't pump a hell of a lot of fuel. Refueling errors, like putting DEF or gasoline introduced into the tank. Best action can be taken to avoid concerns with the fuel system is to ensure the vehicle is only fueled from sources with known quality fuel. And what was that number of centane that we recommended? That Ford recommends? What number? Someone pop it in there. 45. You guys are good. Paid attention. Note, Ford only approves 3 additives. We went over that earlier. If the fuel is contaminated, follow the appropriate service procedure, depending on whether or not the engine has been started with the contaminated fuel or not. Notice, failure to follow these procedures may result in fuel system and or engine damage, may require vehicle warranties to be canceled. Repairs required due to use of improper fluids and fluid are not covered under warranty. It's another good reason to make sure you're using the quality filters from Ford and their recommended additives. Will give you a lot less headaches, okay? Use an appropriate container, take a fuel sample. Do not obtain a fuel sample from the fuel rail. Normal debris on the threads can lead to incorrect conclusions. Let fuel sit for 10-15 minutes. Visually inspect the fuel to see if there's any contamination. Remove the DFC, that's the diesel fuel conditional module, fuel filter cover, and primary fuel element. Remember, look in those little containers once you take the filter out. Allow both the filter and cover to dry for 2 hours. So when these things have problems like this, a visual inspection, white crystals. White crystal formation is an indication of DEF contamination. So look at that, okay? That's going to be a problem. And if there's a cheap filter in there, now you may have done damage to injectors, and we don't need that type of stuff, okay? Check the housing. Remember I just said that? Look at that. If you got murky junk going on in there, you got a problem, okay? Check carefully for evidence like this showing corrosion, upper and DEF lower contamination. So when you have problems like this, if you don't follow the procedure, you're going to probably cause some damage. Drain the fuel tank completely by removing the fuel tank. And by the way, in your service procedure, you're going to need to find out how do you get rid of this contaminated fuel. We've had that here, and we use Safety Clean, and they'll tell you how much X amount of gallons of either gasoline or in this case diesel fuel to properly dispose of, and you're going to have to pass that on to the customer and make sure that tank is cleaned out correctly. Got to take some stuff here. Hang on. Fill the tank with fresh fuel, good quality. Make sure all the filters have been changed. Leave the original fuel, note, leave original fuel filter and pump, fuel lines, fuel rail injectors in place until you're completely done. Then you replace them, right? Perform a fuel system flush. So here's some of the procedures there. Replace both filters, primary and secondary. Replace all the high pressure fuel system components. Very, very expensive, by the way. And all remaining low fuel lines can be reused if no physical damage. Remember, low pressure is just like you working on a system on a gas vehicle, right? Low pressure lines, usually you can flush them out, not a problem. We're going to get into the high pressure pump that is the Achilles heel, okay, and the problem. So drain the tank, more stuff here. In sake of time, I just got to blow past this and get here. Some safety notes. Always remember high pressure systems can reach pressures up to 36,000 PSI. Before removing any component, don't break lines open. Don't do any of that stuff. Use the scan tool to make sure the pressure is down, right? So here is the big problem, the CP4 failures. And the failures are due to what? What was the number one reason? That's right, water, right? So Bosch CP4 high pressure pump used on the 6.7 is the Achilles heel. According to Ford, the primary cause of the failure is related to fuel quality and or contamination. That is the biggie right there, okay? In addition, fuel quality may cause symptoms included but not limited to crank no start, long crank hard start, runs rough, low power, engine knocking, exhaust smoke, fuel rail pressure slow to build up, okay? So this pump, there's a whole bunch of stuff out there. Related oil in the exhaust, TSB. There's TSB here. Diesels draining oil from the exhaust after tube replacement. Some 2011 to 21 diesel engines may have engine oil in the exhaust after the turbo replacement for various reasons. To correct the condition, remove the exhaust and scan the pipe straight up with the turbo inlet facing down with a suitable drain pan. Allow draining for 24 hours. Do not perform a regen. Why wouldn't you perform a regen on something like this? Well, here's why, because we don't have a lot of time. Any related oil going into there is going to burn and make that temperature even hotter. So we do not want to do a regen with extra oil in that system, okay? So please be careful if you're doing that. Some other problems here, TSB's oil pan leaks on 17 to 19 models. 11 oil pans had a pressed-in rubber gasket. 12 to 21 use RTV as a gasket. And by the way, make sure you use high-quality RTV. Do not use some garbage that's out there. Use high-quality stuff. In 22, they went back to a regular press gasket. And 11, the pan is interchangeable with Gen 1 through Gen 3, but not with Gen 4. Okay. Exhaust manifolds in the valley under the turbo brake and the rear exhaust studs have a problem. So there's some aftermarket stuff here. BD Diesel is one aftermarket source that makes an upgrade manifold that is thicker to stop from warping and breaking studs. So, you know, we'd want to make you aware of it. It'd be up to you to use it. We are just giving you some extra information. Coolers, EGR coolers performs overheat, rough idle, decrease in fuel efficiency. Coolers become clogged with soot on the cold side of the cooler. They can be cleaned. Aftermarket's offered solution with a better design for cooling and dependability. Here is Bulletproof Diesel is a company that makes the setup. No start or hot start possible after a P0087 after fuel filter replacement. And here, make sure the OEM filters are used. Make sure you follow proper service bleeding procedures. Make sure the lower filter cap is installed correctly, not broken. The seal is good. And more information there. Let's go over some diagnostic tips. We're getting real close to the end here. System needs 5,000 PSI of fuel pressure to open the injectors. Use a scan tool to monitor fuel rail while cranking. Actual pressure should meet desired pressure. Please circle desire or write that down. Desired pressure. This is going to see on your scan tool. If you're not reaching desired to actual, you may have a problem. If actual meets desired and the engine still won't start, to diagnose any other codes. In your scan tool, shows low pressure cranking. Check low pressure fuel supply, normally 53 to 73. If the low side is good, make sure you inspect the filters. If there's no contamination, remove the return hose from the pressure control valve in the left fuel rail. Plug the hose leading to the fuel rail system. Crank the engine and watch the flow from the valve. If there's a measurable amount of return, the valve is bad. If not, the valve is holding pressure. And there's the other stuff there, again, in the sake of time. I apologize here. Verify no start, hard start. Verify the fuel injected return line pressure is greater than 43. Remove the high pressure regulator from the pump and check for metal debris. So when you get stuff like this, if we have metal debris on here, we got a problem, okay? So, questions. We did a bunch of stuff. Yes?
A couple comments.
Comments.
Will this webinar, there'll be a longer one at some time in the future?
Well, yes. Will there be a longer one? We will do this in multiple parts. So there'll be a couple of, probably like four, at least four, 2-hour webinars. We do have some coming up that I'll speak about. We have a couple of air conditioned ones I'm doing. Pete's doing a couple electrical ones. I think Kenny's doing another diagnostic one. So there are some. Where can you find out? DormanTraining.com. So go to Dorman Training Center, right? Center?
Dorman Training,
Ooh, now I forgot.
yeah, Dorman Training Center.
DormanTrainingCenter.com. Sorry about that.
Another question is, how long before the recording and the handout will be up?
Recording, hopefully by the end of the day. It will be up on the ATTS site. I can guarantee it there. We'll get it over to Dorman as well at the same time. Handout will be up there. You could also email us. Okay, so someone put a comment in there. The CP3 design has a high rate of flow, a low duty cycle, which is why they seem to last forever. Okay. Thanks, Pete, for putting that up there. Any other comments?
Gave some good tips.
Okay. So we want to do a couple of things here real quick before we go. And don't forget, we have Swede coming up next week, Thursday. It'll be on commercial motor vehicle stuff. Dorman is a big sponsor of the TST big event, Saturday, April 6th in Terrytown, New York. We have Understanding Internal Combustion Engines with the rocket scientist himself, Bernie Thompson. Only place he's teaching for the whole year. My other buddy, Wayne Colonna, is a transmission of blame. And if you're a big TikTok fan and YouTube guy, you know Sherwood Cook. He's cracking the case, and he has a whole bunch of good stuff from the two shops he runs down in Georgia. And then my other buddy who's retiring is doing the keynote, Mark Warren. So go to tstseminars.org. You will also see the Dorman people at the Dorman booth, including myself, Pete, and a whole bunch of people, Josh and Kenny, and Sarah and Lester. How can we forget good old Lester? Good guy. A couple other things coming up. Pete and I are doing a hands-on engine and emission class. This class covers everything you need to know on today's engines, okay, and all the emission systems. So we do everything from regular compression, dry, wet, leak down, cylinder leak down, running compression, in-cylinder compression testing for those that don't know how to do that. A whole bunch of other diagnostic stuffs. We run everything from doing relative compression on, includes a book and stuff. Then we have a computer class, May 17th to the 19th. That's covering everything with sensors, actuators, and different computers. It'll be held here in New York. Later on, we'll try to get these things running throughout the country. So questions or comments? If you think this thing was helpful, sorry I had to go so fast, but when you get the handout, you will be able to go through it, and I am available for questions at any time. You could either email me at gtrulia, T-R-U-G-L-I-A, Doreen will type that in there, at dormanproducts.com, or you can just shoot us an email or give us a buzz. So if you think it was helpful, let's see the letter Y. If you think it was not helpful, we'll see a letter N. And I want to thank you for your time once again. Hopefully it didn't nauseate you too much with this lunch and learn. And whew, I got to have dry my mouth out now. Thank you so much for all attending, and we hope to see you in future webinars. Again, go to dormantraining.com. You will see the list of stuff coming up and more great things happening in the future. Thank you and have a great day.